Well, thank you so much, Jace, for joining me today. Really excited to chat about your amazing journey in life. What you've done and accomplished through, your own impact ventures and what you worked on, historically throughout your career and now director of impact at Liquid IV, which is something I drink every day. So it's cool to have you
Oh,
here yeah, and talk about
that's cool. Do you say
yeah,
that to
man.
everybody?
I do not. No, listen, this is if I do, I'll shout it out for sure. I'll mention it.
Okay. Okay.
So
Well,
yeah,
we're
no, so great product. So it's really cool to have you on here. But before we get into sort of the impact angle of Liquid IV, maybe a little bit of why you joined. Talk about your career arc before then, so your path and impact up to this point.
okay. I don't know if we have enough
Yeah,
enough
no, you
time
can
to
kind of start
to
with
do the
start
whole
where you
thing.
feel.
But honestly, it did start a long time ago. Well, first of all, Grant, nice to meet you. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's very, very cool. Some of the people that you've spoken to and the stories that they've told are very, very inspiring. I will do my best to live up to it. But for me, it did start a long time ago. I think like a lot of Americans who have the privilege of going abroad after they
Mm,
study in college. I was one of them, and through circumstances, I found myself in Istanbul, Turkey. Which I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's a fascinating place. It's a cliche to say it's like the crossroads of East and West, but it truly is, both like culturally and geographically. And anyway, I found myself there during like a period of like political upheaval,
hmm
and it
hmm
was the first I had been out of the country before then, but it was the first time I was like actually living in a place, and a place so different from where I grew up, which is here in Los Angeles. And my eyes were just really wide open after that about the way that you see the world from one
Sure.
geographical, one psychological space, to the way that another person in different spaces can see it. And it was really eye opening. And so from honestly, from that moment, I like sort of dedicated myself to both like not only living abroad but working on issues that transcended boundaries, that transcended borders. And so
Yep.
from there, I moved to Morocco. I lived there for a while, and then I went to grad school where I got an MA in international studies with a focus on conflict and conflict resolution. And after that, that was really when I didn't go into that thinking that sort of the impact space, and I mean that very broadly.
Sure.
I didn't think that was my goal. I think I probably was a bit pretentious and a bit arrogant at the time, and I thought maybe I wanted to be, a diplomat or somebody important like that. Little did I know, I started my journey in impact in sort of the disaster response zone. And after grad
Mm,
school, I was working for an organization that worked on the ground after disasters, humanitarian natural disasters. And that sort of opened my eyes as to like what it means to help people directly when
yeah.
they are in need, right? And then from that experience, I wanted to level up even more, so I joined the United States Agency for International Development. I don't know if you or your listeners are familiar with that agency. It's a relatively small U.S. agency, but
They do a lot of cool
when
stuff though.
they absolutely do a lot of cool stuff. When we think about U.S. foreign policy, if we think about it at all,
Yeah.
we usually think of two pillars: defense and diplomacy. That's the Department of Defense and the Department of State. But development is that third D, and
Yep.
that is the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. And so I became a foreign service officer with them, and I was focused on democracy and governance, focused on sort of working with institutions and individuals to help them better respond to the democratic needs of their citizens.
Mm,
And this work took me all over the world. I worked a lot in Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, and really working. The countries there are all at different levels of a journey, from anything from communism to dictatorship total chaos into
Yeah.
more of a democratic space, and getting to work in each of those different contexts. Sometimes in the course of a week, I'd go from one country to another. And, like the differences between Thailand and Vietnam and the Philippines is like each one of them is
Yeah.
at a different stage and working on different challenges and trying to respond to different needs of citizens. So it was just a fascinating picture of the world and of different peoples, and it was truly a remarkable experience. I'll never forget. My last posting was in Afghanistan, which I was there in like 2015, 2014, and I was working directly with individuals who had just been elected to the
Mm.
Afghan parliament, right? The short-lived, sadly, Afghan parliament. And it was fascinating. Some of them had grown up outside of Afghanistan and were coming home and were just dying to help their constituents, their new constituents. And some of them, frankly, they used to be warlords and now they were elected officials, and their transition from someone who has more of a martial mindset to someone who
Sure.
now needs sort of that service provision mindset. It was absolutely fascinating. And after a while, I sort of got to the point where I looked at my watch or my calendar or whatever, and I was like, man, I've lived abroad for a long time, for
Yeah.
aside from stints in Washington D.C., I had lived abroad for like over a decade. And
Wow.
I realized that I was quite homesick and
Yeah.
quite ready to apply what I had learned to my home. I travel all over the world, but I still saw Los Angeles County as my home, and I wanted to get back to it. So I did move. I finally moved back to Los Angeles in 2017, and I started working for what we call a social impact agency.
Ah,
Essentially, I had worked in the nonprofit space for the disaster response organization. I had worked in the public sector for USAID. Now I was going to try my hand with the private sector, right? Because there
yeah.
there are monies all over the place, idle cash that needs
Because
to be applied to, it can be applied to adding, someone's stack of wealth, or it can be applied to people who need certain services and certain things that we all take for granted. The US government collects a lot of taxes. Not all of them go to the right places. And that's a lot of money, but private sector, there's a ton of money there that can be applied. And there's sort of an intersection of benefit, right? There are, in our case, which hopefully I'll get to in some detail, is our focus is to expand clean water access for individuals, right? And not only can we provide some help and assistance in that way, but it's also very, very positive for our consumers to be supporting a brand that does the same. So it's
yeah.
there, that intersection of benefit is truly where I think so much good can happen. And that's sort of, once I saw the private sector side of things working in this sort of agency sort of mode, I realized the potential. And
Yeah.
in that job, I was able to work with huge corporations. I was able to work with celebrities as well, right? Because they also see that benefit intersection, and they sometimes to hilarious effect, they also want to get involved. And after that, I see every sort of stage as like an education, an opportunity for me to learn and hopefully like push things a little further next time. So from that, then I was like, okay, what if I could find a brand and
Mhm.
work in-house somewhere and find a group of dedicated individuals who really wanted to move things forward, who wanted to create a specific goal and move things forward. And that's when I found Liquid IV. I was extremely lucky, and I hope they feel lucky too, but I was extremely lucky to find Liquid IV, because here it was a brand that had so many things going for it. Here in America, we live very depleting lifestyles, right? We often are overworked. We are often dehydrated, right?
Mhm.
Moderately
For sure.
dehydrated. And so Liquid IV had so many things going for it, including the fact that it's an incredibly efficacious product. It works extremely well. And the benefits that an individual has when hydrated is incredible, right? When you're hydrated, you can think straight, you can do all sorts of things that you couldn't do when you were dehydrated. And I'll say how that applies to our work going forward, but we had a great product, right? It wasn't some junk that someone didn't need. It's something that
Yeah.
actually provides a benefit. And then I also found a brand that had impact in its DNA. Before I started, the company was very, very dedicated to donating its product. And a lot of brands donate excess
Sure.
stock of their product. Well, big deal. But the cool thing about Liquid IV is that you say it works, I say it works. A lot of people enjoy Liquid IV for its benefits. Liquid IV is an ORS. It's an oral rehydration solution, which is something that was sort of officially developed by the World Food Program in
Mm.
response to a
Mm.
devastating drought in South Asia back in the 60s or 70s. And what the World Food Program found is that if you created a solution that had a glucose and sodium molecules together, then it could take electrolytes and other vitamins directly into the bloodstream. Like
Mm.
directly. You drink it and it goes through the stomach lining into the bloodstream, and it works very, very fast. And this was a huge breakthrough because after this devastating drought, you had all these people who were not just moderately dehydrated like you and me on any given day, but
Yeah.
their lives were at risk, right? And so our product is based on that formula. We have improved it. We call it Live Hydroscience. It is science backed. It is research. It is tested. It works extremely well. So back in my disaster response days, when we would go on the ground somewhere like Haiti after the earthquake,
Yeah.
one of the things we absolutely had to bring was ORS, oral rehydration solutions, because no matter what's going
Huh.
on in a disaster context, whether it's your town has been destroyed by a tsunami or you are fleeing from conflict, no matter what the disaster, the people affected are more than likely going to be moderately to severely dehydrated. So an ORS is something any reputable disaster response humanitarian assistance organization will bring into the field. And so we thought, well, I hadn't been there yet. This was the exciting part, is that they were already doing this. They were partnering with disaster response organizations. They were saying, you need this, bring it into the field. And so now we have partners all over the world who bring Liquid IV into the field and apply it directly in their operations and directly with people most affected. So not only are people who need it getting it, but they're needing it when they need it.
Yeah.
And the fact that this program had already been on the books was another huge attraction for me toward Liquid IV. And talking to the folks here, they were like, we want to do more, we want to go beyond this. And so that's when I joined Liquid IV. That's when I helped develop our impact strategy, because donating product is great and we donate a lot. To
Yeah.
date, I think we've donated close to 60 million individual servings. We have
Wow.
a goal to donate 15 million servings a year and 150 million in the next decade, and that's very impactful. We work with some of the best disaster response organizations out there, like organizations like Direct Relief, right?
Mhm.
And they get it into the hands of people who need it exactly when they need it, and that's super powerful. And the question that I got to ask when I joined was, okay, that's great, but what happens the next day? Are we just going to keep
Mm.
giving people more and more sticks? That's good, but that's not a solution. So we asked ourselves, how do we address the root causes behind that water insecurity, right? How do we impact these folks' lives, going forward, and make sure they can maintain water security for themselves and their community. And so that is what brought me to Liquid IV. That's what brought me to help develop this strategy, and that's what we're working on today.
Amazing. I kind of want to go back to, your time getting all this education, let's say, just through your work and your development strategies and your education, you kind of had this, this massive life and career of work and sort of development a lot of different ways. One thing I'm a bit optimistic on is corporations looking at professionals in your space that are kind of looking at maybe the next chapter or going to recruit these really
Mm.
smart people doing this work
Mhm.
because I do think corporations have, like you said, there's a lot of capital. They
Mhm.
have to they want to deploy it in some ways, and I think there's a big advantage, but also like possibility for real impact when corporations get involved and not
Mhm.
greenwash and do actual
Mhm.
real development work. But that's
Mhm.
not their specialty. Their
Yeah.
specialty is doing sales and looking at the balance sheet. You just have a different type of skill set. When you were and the biggest thing I look at it in whether it's advocacy or looking to make an impact, there's often not like strategy involved. There's a lot of emotions.
Right.
You mentioned kind of
Mhm.
celebrities always want to get involved and people want to get involved.
Mhm.
And they kinda do these things just out of emotion, and then
Yeah.
it might not make the impact that they seem fit, or they get worn out after 12 months of trying to do stuff, and they kinda just go off and do normal stuff. Corporations, I think,
Mhm.
maybe the same way. Have you maybe looked at the last 5 to 10 years of maybe corporate philanthropy, from your time,
Mhm.
doing agency working? Has that shifted a bit? Do you feel like there's more capital, there's more investment into impact arms at corporations, and do you think, others are doing it right?
Well, the answer is yes. There is more of a sense of how do we create real lasting impact that addresses the root causes of the problems we're trying to solve. And I think the reason for this is because folks, brands are listening to consumers, right?
Mm,
And
mhm,
consumers are the ones with their heads screwed on straight. They know from greenwashing, right? They know when they are being told a feel good story
mhm.
versus a brand that's actually making changes and actually trying to create a future that is better and not just a present that is temporarily alleviated. And that I think has been the shift is that consumers are saying like, no, 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 we're not buying this. This is a feel good story. I think they understand intrinsically the difference between impact and charity, right? Charity
Mm,
makes you feel good. It provides like a little hit of serotonin. Oh, I helped this person out today. And that's great. If we all did nice little things for strangers and people we knew, the world would be more pleasant to be around. But to the world would be more pleasant to live in. But it doesn't actually solve anyone's problems. Yes, I would love, someone to buy me a coffee after I spill it all over myself or whatever, but that doesn't solve the problem of my clumsiness, right?
yeah.
And not that clumsiness is a problem to solve, but I think brands are starting to understand like, okay, wait, we need to actually get if we say we care about climate change, we actually need to do something about it. We can't just post like a green square on our Instagram grid and hashtag
Mhm.
for the planet. That doesn't actually do anything. And luckily, there is a small but growing cadre of professionals who are
Yeah.
versed in both the private sector and in impact, right? And there's not a tremendous amount of us, but to all you social impact professionals out there, I salute you. This group of folks is deployed in brands all over the place, and they are really pushing for change. And I believe that there is a strong connection between the brands that take it seriously and then their future success. Because when they're listening to consumers, this is what consumers want. They're concerned about the state of things, right? And so I think they're demanding that their brands take action, and we go back to that benefit intersection, right? It benefits the consumers, it benefits the brand, and it moves whatever issue you're trying to solve, it moves those solutions to the front.
I wanna kinda talk about the strategy for a second, and maybe not the
Hmm.
strategy, but just, when you came in and you looked at what they were currently doing and what they wanted to do, what was your interaction with water as an issue, right? Were you versed in
Mm.
it? Did you have to educate yourself on how big this problem is? Who are the players in it? and how can we, fit somewheres in this stack of trying to solve.
Mhm. Totally. So Liquid IV's purpose is to elevate the vitality of people and planet. And one thing we understood is that without clean water,
Mm, yeah, no
we don't have
business.
a
Yeah,
product, we don't
yeah,
have a business, we don't have anything, right? We're
yeah,
all working somewhere else
yeah.
without clean water. I mean, without clean water, we're all
We're,
sadly
we're
dead,
all
but
we're all maybe not working.
right, right. So we understood that as we created a strategy and created a goal to go after, that it needed to be based around water. And this is where the education came in. I was not a water expert. I explained I had worked in democracy and governance and building institutions and working with individuals in the civil society. So I was not a water expert,
Yeah,
right? And so my education, the education of my team was a tremendous one. And what we found absolutely shocked us. There are 2.2 billion, with a B, 2.2 billion people are all over the world who do not have access to clean water. 2.2 billion
that's
people.
great.
Now, what does that mean? They don't have access to clean water. Well, it doesn't mean that they're dropping dead because they don't get to drink water. It means that their entire lives are oriented first around getting water. I want you to think, Grant, for a second. What happens when you wake up in the morning? An average day, what happens? For me, first thing I do, sorry to be blunt, I go to the bathroom and I probably splash a little water on my face. All right, time to get up, time to get moving. I go out into the kitchen. There's my dog, right? He's a big husky shepherd out here in Los Angeles in July. It's very hot. So I got to make sure that guy has water. So I'm
Hmm.
filling his bowl with water. Okay, he's drinking. Maybe I should have a drink too. I'm going to make some coffee, right? Cuz I got a big day. I got to get active.
I
So
see
I
where
make
you're going
coffee.
here.
Yeah, you see where I'm going with this. I could go on. So I make coffee and then I go in the shower like, okay, I need to be presentable. I'm going in the office. So I hop in the shower, I get all cleaned
Yeah,
up, right? Every single one of those things takes running water, right? And I didn't mention my clothes were clean because
yeah.
the day before I had washed them,
And
right?
this is like an hour into your day. You've already
Yeah,
used like, yeah, yeah.
that's it. Just 1 hour into my day. And, after all that, I'm feeling clean. I'm feeling confident. I'm prepared. I'm presentable to enter society and to do the things I need to do. Right now, 2.2 billion people do not get to do that every day because they don't know where they're getting water. Right. And that's you can survive for, I don't know what it is, many days without food, but you can't survive very long without water. So it's one of their first priorities. And they're in a family. Someone needs to be designated to be the person who needs to go get that water. And often it's women and girls. And often this is taking place in spaces where it's much, much more insecure for women and girls than it is here in the United States, if you can imagine. So this is the problem that 2.2 billion people face. And I think, and my colleagues think, and I think most people, when introduced to this information, think this is an absolute tragedy. We cannot let this go on any further, right? Because if we're trying to move into the future and address a lot of these existential challenges, we need everybody to be happy and healthy just to solve our problems. And it is not right that 2.2 billion people are denied this basic human right, which is access to clean. So that is where we focused our strategy around. We work with communities to expand access to clean water. And we have a very specific goal right now. By the end of 2026, we want to have expanded clean water access for 2 million people all over the world. Now, 2 million, 2 billion, we have to start somewhere,
Sure.
right? And we are saying that this is our goal. Eventually, we hope others will join us, right? In this goal. And so 2 billion, 2 million can be 20, can be 200, and and then the dial really gets moving.
You're saying access to clean water. What does that actually look like, or what does that actually
Mm-hmm,
mean
mm-hmm.
as far as getting with organizations that are building wells, and you're helping them,
Mm-hmm.
build wells? Is it building even different piping? Is it working with the local community to build certain things, or just get filtration in there at scale? Like
It's
access to clean water. What is that? And I know it can mean different things in different parts of
yeah.
the world. Maybe give us an idea of what it is, and maybe what have you seen through the work
Right.
working? What
Right.
has worked?
Well, it means different things in different contexts. So our primary mode, the way that we advance that goal to expand access to 2 million people is through grant making.
Okay,
We have given to date around $6 million in grants. In 2023 alone, we gave $1.85 million. And it is through our grant making initiative that we donate to organizations that are the ones
gotcha.
providing this access on the ground. So we talked a minute ago about being experts. Like, we're not experts, right? We know that we are not water experts. So we work with the experts. We work with the practitioners who have been on the ground for years, and we fund their projects so that they can
Okay,
provide this expanded water access on the ground. So what does it look like? So the team last year, we had given a grant to an organization called MAP International. They're one of our partners, and they were working in Liberia, which is in West Africa, on clean water access. Now, Liberia is a very poor country, and there are folks out there who, in the rural areas, who there are no in their towns, in their communities, there are no wells. There's nothing, right? And
gotcha,
so
gotcha.
in some places, folks are either going extremely great distances to get water, or they're relying on local natural water sources, which are not clean at all.
Yeah,
So in that context, we are helping to dig wells and build
gotcha.
wells, and create water commissions in those communities to manage the use and the repair of the well should something happen. So that's one context. Another, the team and I were in Rwanda a few weeks ago. We had given another grant to an organization called Water for People. And in Rwanda, things are a little more developed. Rwanda is in East Africa. Things are a little more developed. In these communities, essentially, they were linking different communities together. They were, Rwanda is very hilly. There's lots of hills, so there's lots of artesian springs. And what this project was doing was helping to build pumping stations that would take water from those artesian springs and then distribute them to different communities, right? So now you have more advanced technologies being applied to this, and the result was the same. You had communities where people were having to walk every day to get water,
Yeah,
or like take the bus to the closest town and buy bottled water, which is a total drag on the environment. All that extra plastic that doesn't go anywhere. So now these folks had water right there in their community. It was nice and clean. They didn't have to spend extra time going back and forth to get it. This model was being applied in many different parts of Rwanda. So this can mean water access can mean a lot of different things. We work, just to give you another example, we work with an organization called Dig Deep. Dig Deep is focused on the problem here in the United States, all over the world, 2.2 billion people. Well, 2.2 million of those people who don't have clean water live right here in the United States. 2.2 million Americans do not have access to clean water. And so Dig Deep, a great organization, has identified several hot spots where where the access to water is really, really low, and people who really, really need it. And they're working to, here in the United States, we have a water grid in most
yeah,
places, right? Even if you build a new house, there is piping that you can connect into and become part of the water grid. And so that's an advantage, but we have a lot of people, we work with communities in Appalachia, in West Virginia, in McDowell, Wyoming counties, folks who live in, up on top of hills or like deep in hollers, and we're connecting them to the water
gotcha,
grid. And
gotcha.
that's an amazing thing as well. These folks who maybe they had trucks and they had these huge containers that you can fill like hundreds and hundreds of gallons, and they were having to go far and do that whole thing. And then during the winter, if it freezes, I mean, that creates a whole disaster. Now they're connected to the water grid, they have it in their homes, and like the human dignity that provides is huge. Is
Yeah.
huge.
I'll end on 2 questions here. One would
Sure.
be, maybe just some advice you would give to, younger people looking to have a career that perhaps leads them to, a director of impact I mean, this is a pretty freaking cool role, right? Like growing up, I mean,
It is,
this job
no
didn't even
doubt.
exist, right? And
Mhm.
so,
Mhm.
these I think it's important to showcase that these roles in society actually exist now, where you don't have to go work at an underfunded nonprofit,
Yeah.
and struggle financially to have a real impact in the world. A
Mhm.
lot of these companies are going to be hiring teams in this area
Yep.
for young people maybe graduating. What would you say that would you recommend maybe or advice you'd give them to go down a path where they can be sort of an executive in a company one day in an
Mhm.
impact role? I think that's where this is going.
Great question. I think you, as most things in life, you got to start within, right? What do you care about? What's the issue that you think needs solving? And I think that's a good place to start. We all live in communities. Look around. Look around your community. What are some of the issues that you see? How is your community being affected? What's going on in your home? I think that's a great place to start, right? Because
Mm,
people, my whole journey took me all around the world, but I was still deeply connected to a sense of home that
yeah.
I find here in Los Angeles. So what is the issue that is affecting your community? What is the issue that you would like to see solved? And I'd start there. Like even before you need to even before like finding a job and working someplace, what can you do in your community right now to help solve that problem? And then I would look for companies that first and foremost share your values. What companies share your values? Try to get in touch with them, try to talk with them, but start from that place. Start from the issue that you care about and the values that you find are non negotiable to you.
Mm.
And I think from that place, listen, it's 2024. It is not easy to get a job, right? It's in a lot of cases. I'm very privileged and lucky to have a job that I love. But I think if you start from a place of true feeling of connection with your community and a true sense of the values that you hold dear, I think from that place you can find kindred spirits. You can find
Mm.
them. And as you build your career, you will start to hone and refine what it is that you work on, what strengths you have, and then you become more and more of an asset to whatever company wants to hire you. And hey, if you can't find a band that wants to have you, start your own band.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Last question I'll have is just a little bit on the future, and we kind of talked a little bit about some of the future goals and stuff like that. But if you want to look maybe 3 to 5 years down the road, what are some
Mhm.
of the goals and successes you and the team would like to achieve?
First and foremost, we are very focused on our goal by the end of 2026 to expand clean water access for 2 million people all over the world. After that, we're going to keep working on water access. I don't know exactly, obviously, like what that would look like, but
Yeah.
I really want to do work that is good enough to inspire others to join us
Mm.
in that clean water access journey. I think Liquid IV, we have dedication and commitment from all levels of our leadership here at Liquid IV. This is a great place to move the water agenda forward. We're here in Los Angeles. There's so many great organizations dedicated to solving different aspects of the water crisis in America and in the world. Once we're all able to join all of our forces and join all of our bodies of knowledge together, then we can really move this issue forward because climate change is only going to impact us more and more. And water is at that tip of the spear when it comes to climate change. So I think the more organizations we can get on board, the more different types of professionals we can apply to the problem, the more we can drive forward solutions and one day solve the problem where everyone in the world has the water that they need to thrive.
Thank you so much, Jace, for taking the time. I know you're busy doing some awesome work every day, but best of luck to you and the team for the next decade. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks so much, Grant. This has been a pleasure.